The world doesn't need another me. That's why there's only me. The world needs the best version of you. I think the best advice is surrounding yourself with a community of people. If it's not your family, then find an elder in your church or your community, an auntie, if you will, that is looking out for you. Find people that are willing to see you when you can't see yourself. That's truly what saved me.
Right there, it would have been a nice time for the drop right here.
We can do this here, watch me rock the flow. Killing it a must, never option, no.
Spent guys at the crab table, still ain't signed to a rap label. DVD when I ain't have cable. I got balls, he ain't rap label. A 60 for me is man fatal. Can't see me like a bad angle.
Absolutely, ain't going nowhere. We will be forever and ever and ever.
Peace, 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 beautiful family. This is Dr. Walter Hidalgo, and this is the Know Thyself Show. The Know Thyself Show utilizes the metaphor of the shelf in order to extrapolate the self. And the way we do that is we invite guests to come in and share something about themselves. And I am so excited right now and grateful, but let's get right into the agenda as we always do. I like to shout out a couple of individual groups that rock with us. So I want to give a big shout out to my brother Steve and his 2020 collection. Support Black-owned businesses, please. Even though, we passed 2020, we still got that 2020 vision. You know what I mean? I want to give a big shout out to my brother William Young, MC, father. He got a book called Gorilla Con. Definitely check it out. So again, support. Speaking of books, definitely check out my book, Beyond the Four Walls, The Rising Ministry and Spirituality of Hip Hop. Go to the website, www.knowthyself.tv, where you can find out more about the book, workshops, stuff that we're doing. The other thing that we always do is we go from groups, individuals, so to speak, sponsors to groups and people. So today, man, I wanna give a big shout out to all of my Nigerians, yo. Shout out West Africa, shout out to the motherland. We love you, we in solidarity with you, and we all come from there. So shout out to Lagos. I shared with you, the biggest audience I ever spoke in my life, 50,000, was in Lagos, and it was one of the most transformative experiences in my life. So shout out to Nigeria. Shout out to Afro Beats. I freaking love Afro Beats, yo. I want to give a big shout out to all my youth ministers. Yeah, I think that's very important. I was a youth minister. I still am, but in parishes and different stuff, I get it. I want to give a big shout out to all my coaches and trainers. Super spiritual. If you want coaching, home coaching, holla at me. Right, shout out to the Elite Method, and shout out to this person right here, but I'm not yet. I'm getting excited, so let me slow down, right? I also want to give a huge, big shout out to all my strong Black women of faith, man. I can't even tell you how many Black women have empowered me. Shout out to Monique, my mentor, who's the cousin of Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. I just love her, so she was a former guest. So shout out to her, because I got somebody here with me that I respect, that I admire, and that I'm so proud of. My sister from another Ogechi.
Thank you for having me. Oh, this is a nice intro.
Everybody's like, yo, this is like the best intro again, because you deserve it.
Gassed up. Okay.
So before we dive really deep into this conversation, especially coming from this gathering that we're here, shout out to Cali, shout out to the West Coast. We here, you know what I'm saying? Shout out to all my Bay Area family, San Francisco, San Jose, we here. I'll see some of my friends and family later, but shout out to Cali. This is where we out, Los Altos to be specific. But what I like to do is I always like to contextualize things, right? Have you ever seen that movie, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures?
No.
Oh, you gotta watch
Okay.
it.
Yes. I gotta watch it.
So basically, the premise of it is just two young guys that are able to go back in time through an elevator. It was like a phone booth. You know what I'm saying? I love history, so it was cool.
Yes,
so they got
yes.
to go to different parts in history. So if we were to step into that time machine and go back to a younger Ogechi, what would we see? What would we hear? Because you're originally from
Nigeria.
Nigeria, we hear. Talk to us about that.
Okay. Well, it depends on how far back you want to go, but I always think of 16-year-old Ogechi because she prayed for me, current Ogechi, a lot. She probably would be shocked of what I've accomplished. 16-year-old Ogechi knew that there was something within her, but the whole world and people around her told her to minimize herself. And so you would see a young woman floundering, but hopeful. And I remember praying deeply, I just know this isn't it. I know that you have something more for me. And dealing with, everybody has different family situations. So we all have to navigate those traumas. And knowing that there was more, or hoping that there was more. And in faith, hope, and love, hope was always the one thing that I held on to the most. And anytime I was in a valley situation of life, I would always look up, as I'm trying to climb out of that with hope. So that's probably the time where I really felt like if I just keep working hard, I can transform my life. It will take time, but it will happen. And I trusted God a lot in that. So yeah, 16-year-old Ogechi was going through it, but she was hopeful.
We were just talking about the service that you do mentoring and coaching of kids. Tell us about that.
So the coaching piece, as somebody that has been coached, I wanted to give back and coach. I've been coaching for like 20 years. I work with an organization called the Elite Method, where we provide in-house coaching to young people between the ages of 4 and 14. It's like Big Brother meets a private coach. So we like to integrate social-emotional development with physical skills.
You help build up their confidence, help them find some things they're good at.
I'm not trying to knock on social media, but we are in the digital age, man. Bullying, all-time high. Suicide, all-time high.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Everybody want to compare to each other instead of empowering. I'm coming at a young person like, yo, I see you because you're a reflection of the divine. So I'm going to treat you as such.
I always say hope is hearing other people's experiences. So you bringing me a lot of hope right now. And, as someone that is also the product of immigrant parents, my parents came here from Guatemala, one for economical, one really political, in the late 70s. We were born here. I know that, you immigrated from, West Africa to the U.S. Talk about that, because we're living in a very interesting times, obviously, with migration, the influx in the border and all over the world of people escaping due to what we're doing to creation. We're talking about all this stuff. So I want to hear, I think it's very important to hear your story with that, or whatever you're willing to share.
So I always talk about my immigration story as a privileged one, because I came really young. I was 1 year old, so I don't really have solid memories of Nigeria. I have almost dreams of it, and obviously pictures that help put things into context, and stories from my mom. But I say privileged because my dad, by chance and luck, won a lottery to go to college here in the U.S. And that's no, he didn't earn it. Obviously, he was good in school, but there's really a luck with a lottery like that, and so it's a privilege. And I know that that's not something that everyone had the opportunity for. So him coming here and then going back to Nigeria, meeting my mom, fall in love, have me, and then bringing us to the United States. I didn't have a choice in the matter, and I guess my mom did, but really, if you want to stay together, she didn't have a choice in the matter. And so being uprooted from family to start a new life in a new family in another country, and going from a place where you are part of the majority, and then being thrust into a situation where you're a triple minority, immigrant, black, not having a solid citizenship status, so being fearful of what will happen with your traveler's visa and then green card, just messes with your mind. And growing up with that, I didn't get my citizenship until I was in the 4th grade. So those years before I had finally had my papers officially, really, you had to make sure you stayed out of trouble, didn't ruffle any feathers. If I was bullied, I didn't talk to the police about it, because there was a fear that's just inherent with being a newly arrived person. And now when I think of the way that we view immigrants here, that lack of dignity and that fear is still perpetuated. And the dignity, if it is seen, unfortunately, is related to the labor that they can provide and the value that they have for our capitalistic society, and not the inherent value they deserve as humans, crossing boundaries that we arbitrarily created. So that's my spiel on immigration. I could go on and on.
Yeah, no, this is great. No, I think this is important. Like, even when we talk about ministry and even spirituality, of sharing your story, it's really important. But I want to know what for that recent migrant, or the one that's thinking about it, what do you want to say to him or her?
Oh, that's a great question. To that recent migrant, whether they're at the border or praying for asylum from Africa or Asia or wherever, because again, the story of immigration isn't always told in its totality. And undocumented immigrants are not just those crossing the border. They're our African brothers and sisters that have come for whatever reason, and they end up being undocumented, or they're asylum seekers. They're Asian brothers and sisters. So I think, one, prioritize your story. Someone else is always going to want to tell your story and minimize or hyperbolize your experience. So safeguard your story and know that that is valuable, and tell it to whomever you trust to tell it to, because I think the danger of media is diluting or paraphrasing the immigrant experience, and there's a lot of nuance in what it means to be an immigrant, and being married to an immigrant as well. That has taught me another side of what it means to be an immigrant. So own your story and claim it, and don't let anyone else be your voice.
So it's like we're moving in a generation now, right? Very digital. So that's changing the landscape. So this was almost like very prophetic, a prophecy, someone kind of looking into the future of what could be, right? Because the reality is that whether it's in the school, at a bar, at the church, we are up on our phones. Why? Because we are plugged into the matrix.
The workshop tonight was excellent. The kids were engaged, and Walter did a great job. He even had me and Donald answer questions. So can't wait for the next one.
The session was excellent. The kids were really engaged. They really understood and learned a lot about social media and what their impact could be. I'm looking forward to the next session.
No, I think, again, super important. I love what you said. Prioritize your story, right? Because we got too many his story. We need more her story, right? I want to switch it up a little bit, because we've been talking about ministry, and ministry is the reason we're here in some regards. I forgot who was it that said that ministry is church in action.
Yes.
I don't think people really understand what ministry is. I have friends that look at me and don't understand what I do. It's okay. I just say I'm an educator, I'm a coach. That's what I do. And this is what you do. That's why I love it. We got so much connect. So I want you to talk about what is ministry, specifically the work that you're doing, at the parochial level or wherever, a woman of ministry.
I like that definition of ministry because it requires an active participation on your part. So I think of ministry as an accompaniment, journeying together, which is a phrase that's used a lot, but it truly is a journeying together. My entrance into ministry was not, I said yes to it, but I was reluctant because I didn't feel adequate enough. I was not a theology major, a religious studies person. I was still struggling with my faith, and I think that was still valuable, that someone saw potential in me and my story and my experience and value that I can give to young people. So thank you to her for hounding me and harassing me. And I finally said yes. And the first few years were stressful, but I learned a lot that I didn't know. You go through faith and you get your sacraments, and then you kind of just become not a sheep, but you kind of just become one with the water, and you don't think what is your why, what is rooting you into your faith. And so having to explain and teach faith to young people and help them figure out their why, you have to determine that for yourself. So it's a dual process of learning together as we journey together in faith. They just happen to be younger and maybe have less life experience, and so I can be a combination of a mentor and educator. And now in my job working in a parish, it's interesting how I never thought that I would also have to minister to parents. I was always thinking of I love young people. They give me a lot of hope and energy, and I just know that they're the current, not just the future of the church and society. But so many of the more difficult and meaningful moments of ministry have been ministering to parents who were disattached from their own faith and their why, and their roots were not deeply watered or grounded. So helping them figure out how to stay connected for themselves so that they can model that for their kids, and encouraging people who have life experience older than me, but knowing and trusting that God has entrusted me with wisdom that I should impart. And that's what ministry is, being so in tune with your relationship with God that you can't help but share that with others.
I think it's so beautiful the way you put it and said it. I love it, and I'm gonna poke you a little bit and go deeper on this one right here, because I hate this question, but somebody needs to hear this, right? You're a woman of color. I hate these terms, I really do. But in a church, specifically Catholic, and we all know sort of the historical and negative connotations that's associated with that, right? I think someone needs to hear this. So walk with us and talk to us. What does that mean to you? How has sometimes in a space, it could be a different denomination too, because we all know patriarchy, sexism, racism, all these things that are not just things that occur outside of the church, but they spill over into the four walls of the church.
Yes.
How do you operate? How do you move? What does that mean to you, being a woman of color who's really dedicated to her faith? Because you could have been a CEO of Fortune 500 the way you move and operate.
Way more.
You know what I mean? So this is super fast, and it's not just economical. I'm talking about self-fulfillment.
Yes.
But I guess how does this bring fulfillment given all those sort of external factors?
When you were asking that question, I immediately thought of my hero and influence, Sister Thea Bowman, and the way that she has inspired me in the way that I do ministry. She has a famous speech that she gives to bishops, and she talks about what it means for her to be Black and Catholic. She brings her whole self, her song, dance, history, ancestry, all of that into the church. And that truly is what it means for me now. Before, it was different. Before, I put on my Nigerian costume when it was like a cultural day, or I can finally bring out my Nigerianness, and then I would go back and kind of melt myself into the mix of the congregation and the other youth. But now, having the responsibility to minister to young people, I want them to identify their uniqueness, be proud of being Filipino Catholic, Black Catholic, Latina, Honduran, El Salvadorian, wherever, and own that cultural attachment if they have it, and bring that to society, the church, rather than hide that or put it away for fear of what people might think. So for me, what it means to do ministry as a Black Catholic, the only full-time Black person at my church ever, I recognize that in my position there is a little bit of a burden, but there's a blessing in the fact that I can finally represent Black Catholic leadership in my parish. I can finally hopefully open the door for someone else whenever I choose to leave to take that place, and it's not an anomaly, but there's been proven success by someone that looks like me and is like me. But also recognizing that I can't represent all of the totality of being Black and Catholic. I am nuanced, just like the diaspora is nuanced, and making sure that just because I'm the only doesn't mean that I should bear the brunt of teaching you and how to be in relationship with the diversity of Black and brown people in our parish. So for me, I think it's just that continuous journey of making sure that I'm being my whole self and bringing my whole self in staff meetings and presentations and retreats with students, with parents, but also understanding that there's a responsibility that comes with it, and making sure that it's not too overbearing.
Well said, and I agree. We don't want to be poster childs for no one. We are individuals too, and I think that's important, and I really appreciate that you said that. As we always do in the Know Thyself show, we invite guests to share something that comes from their shelf. Ogechi, what you got for us today?
So excited. Okay, so this is a piece. There's a Nigerian American. I don't actually know if she calls herself Nigerian American, but she lives in America. She's a Nigerian Igbo.
Shout out
artist.
to Igbo, yeah, and
Yes.
shout out to one of my heroes and favorite artists of all time, Fela Kuti. Gotta say it.
She's a artist and she does graphic design work, and I fell in love with her artwork over Instagram, and I purchased this piece, and I call it Cameleon, and I think that's what she calls it. And so I was like, I have to have this, because I used to joke up until my early 30s that I was a social chameleon, that I can fit in different scenarios and make any group pretty much like me. And I thought that was a superpower, which in a way it is, but in my discovery of trying to make sure that I'm my full authentic self, I shouldn't be liked by every single person, because there's a fallacy in thinking that being your true self means that you have to be liked by everyone. And so in being a chameleon and trying to shape shift who I was to fit the different groups that I encountered, whether they were very privileged white parents that I needed to impress, or bullies that I was trying to acquiesce in school. Some of it was from survival, especially with bullying and dealing with traumas. But as a survivor, I don't need to keep holding on to those survival tactics. So I have this up where I put my all my makeup and stuff above my dresser next to my bookshelf, because it just reminds me of how far I've come, and I'm still working on it. But I love that the chameleon. I mean, she's also gorgeous, which I like to believe that I am. But I just love that the chameleon is blended in to her, and that was so much of who I was trying to be, and that's not who I am anymore.
I'm so happy right now. That's why I told her. I was telling her like this. I love this right now because I'm a big proponent of loving thyself. You gotta love. You are the imago Dei, you know. You're the image and likeness of the Lord, and like I think in a world where so much self-hate and confusion, like it's so important to embrace that in you. So I just want to say I appreciate that you sharing that, and I think that's dope. I have to ask this because notice how I kind of sometimes I don't ease into other combos, like I jump in around, but I felt now is a good time to ask because I think this is important too. I really do believe that there's a spirituality to sports.
Yes.
You feel me?
Yeah,
Like the training, I played football all my life. You know what I mean? I coach as well, kids. I home coach kids. I love it. It's just a blessing. I want you to talk about just briefly, you can, you know, because you do powerlifting, because you are an empowered woman. Yeah. Okay, so can you just talk a little bit about that and how that kind of like interweaves with just who your essence and the work that you do?
Yes, so I got into powerlifting in my like mid-20s, which is a little late for some people, but I got into it at a time where I just needed something to call my own, and I wanted to redefine my relationship with my body. And I had always been attracted to strength training. I took those classes. I was always like the only girl or one of few in the weight room in high school, because I come from a family of very muscular people and women and men. So that was just...
It's that Igbo,
yes.
You feel me?
So that was what I was gifted in terms of physique. Yeah. And so it naturally meant that I would use those strong legs and arms to lift weights and run and do all the things that I did in high school. But somewhere along the way in college, I kind of lost a sense of pride in my body and its capabilities and the strength. And so my brother, who's younger, had been doing bodybuilding and powerlifting, and he suggested I try. And the first 6 months, my coach at the time basically just put me through almost like a two-a-day situation. He's also a football coach. It was just cardio and basics. I didn't get to touch a full barbell for months, and I was so frustrated. But in thinking back, that was necessary discipline that I had to learn, that we want to jump to like this big test or this big conquest, and sometimes God disciplines you in making you go through the grunt work. And at that same time, I was working I had just ended a job working at this bead warehouse, which was far below my capabilities. I dealt with a lot of microaggressions. It was not what I wanted, but it was just what I had at the time. And I was like, I need to leave this job. This is not the job for me forever. I can't be here forever. But I also knew like I just needed to power through. And that's a job that I learned so many skills in, even though it's my worst job. So the Lord put me in that position. First of all, it was humbling, and I needed to learn how to be humble and to just grind, as it will. And also in so many of the things I learned, back end website, customer service, dealing with difficult people, I attribute to that terrible job. So in the same way, that first few months of powerlifting and that time with the terrible job, and then moving to a part-time job where I knew I wanted a full-time job, but it was just the next step. Then I finally started using the heavier weights, and I learned to barbell squat. Even though I had done it before, I had to start at the basics. So I felt like at that time in my life, and that time in powerlifting, it was a rebuilding, and there's a process to powerlifting and programming. You don't just lift 500 pounds every single day until you have a competition. You start with lighter weights and you move up that progressive overload. So, and sometimes you'll try an attempt with a lift to see if you can max out and fail, and then you'll try again a few weeks later and fail, and you feel like you're not making any progress. But I always think of, this is my nerd, sorry, I was pre-med, so science I love. In the phases of liquids, if you look at the graph, you start at, say, like 0 degrees Celsius, and then it just goes and goes and goes until the water gets warm enough to rise, and then it moves from frozen to water. And then the same thing, it goes and goes and goes until it's 100 degrees, I think, and then it jumps up. So that's kind of how training can be. There's a plateau, and you can either quit during that plateau period, or you can continue to go until you've developed enough for that next jump of that lift. And each year that I've done it, there have been jumps, but it also is a test of my patience and consistency, because you're showing up, you're really not getting anything out of it, and it's hard, frustrating. There's no praise, especially as a woman lifter. No one's really praising you. In fact, there's a lot of haters in the gym. But I loved it, and in my area, there wasn't a lot of female powerlifters that I could look to. Now there's powerlifting's blown up. It's huge. It's insane. There's high school kids doing it. It's the best thing to see. And there was a time that there was this young girl that was competing, and she was like, I remember you competing, I don't know when. I felt very old when she said it, but I was like, she was like, there wasn't any other girls, but you were there, and I thought you were amazing. And it's like, this is why you do something, and you take a chance at a sport and being a representative, because you're opening the door and inspiring people to see themselves in that possibility. And for me, it is a spiritual process, not just the patience and life lessons, but also the fact that God has gifted me with this body and its capabilities. So let me use this gift. And if I'm using this gift and people ask me, like, how can you do this? I use it then to glorify Him. So there's a spiritual process, and also a lot of powerlifters listen to like rap. I love DMX, so sometimes I listen to DMX.
R.I.P. to the
but
dog.
I also listen to praise and worship and gospel, and anything that keeps me centered and focused, and just reminds me that it's not about me as I lift. Even if I get frustrated and angry, it's about just being able and capable to do the lift, and praise God that I have this body, especially now that I had a knee injury a couple years ago. I'm even that much more appreciative of the capabilities of my body, because I know what it was like to not even be able to walk. So
yeah, I can totally relate with everything you said. It's interesting that coach first was pushing you with cardio, and whoever that coach is, shout out, because it's interesting. He or she, he probably wanted to build your heart first, if you got it, you know. And I really, with sports, I love it because, you know, I remember one time I used to work at a treatment facility in Massachusetts for kids. It was like a halfway house, and I'll never forget, we were watching basketball, and one of the elders, Ogechi, was right there working with me. And I forget what game we were watching, and somebody did something crazy. It was an NBA championship. I don't remember who. And one of the kids goes, man, look at that. I wish I could do that. And the elder goes, yeah, you can do that. But I want you to know something. When you do it, it's not to compete against him. You see what he did? He's showing us what the human, we could do. So it's kind of like a litmus test. It's like, so that means someone else is going to break that. And someone else is going to break that. And it's us elevating. And elevating, and as is the struggle and is life, right?
Yes.
You're gonna get hurt, you're gonna fall, you're gonna break this, you're gonna crack that. And I felt like the gym has always been the place of really showing what you're made out of. This is where you fight the demons inside you, and you take it all on there.
And I think, especially with powerlifting, there's not really a team element. No one is helping you lift the weights or anything like that. You have people that you can lift with,
spotters and
spotters and things like that. But you're the one lifting. So if your mind isn't right, if you're not focused, if you don't get the technique down consistently and take each lift, whether it's just a bar or 200 pounds, with respect and intention, injuries happen quickly. And so there's a respect that's needed there, and there's also a discipline, and you're competing against yourself. So really, it's you against your brain. And some of the lifts that I've lost or missed were not because I physically wasn't able. It's like my mind was not right.
Always.
And so-
That's been me too.
Yeah.
And someone told me the second before you start any sports and stuff that we're talking about, and you start doubting yourself, it is over.
Yes.
You have to tell yourself, I'm worthy of this,
Yes.
and I deserve this.
Yes.
Man. Okay, let me slow down because I'm getting excited. But I'm going to switch it, and because I want to start wrapping this up because we can go on forever. But you're a minister, you're a power lifter, you're a wife, like somewhere out in this world is a young Ogechi who is, wants to be you in some way. I always ask, what's one piece of advice you would give to that young person that's trying to follow your path?
Don't.
The best answers have been that one.
Path is filled with tears and blood and sadness and trauma. So what you're seeing is the product of all of that. And so unless you want that, you just do your own path. What is for you and no one else. And so I think Oprah said it's better to be a first-rate version of yourself than a second-rate version of someone else.
Yes.
The world doesn't need another me. That's why there's only me. The world needs the best version of you. I think the best advice is surrounding yourself with a community of people. If it's not your family, then find an elder in your church or your community, an auntie, if you will, that is looking out for you. Find people that are willing to see you when you can't see yourself. That's truly what saved me. If I didn't have those women in my life, when I couldn't tell my parents that I was dealing with depression or bullying, when I couldn't tell my family different things that happened, there were women that could always see me, even though I tried to be a chameleon and hide those parts of myself. Especially my mentor, she would always be like, "How are you?" And I say, "I'm fine." And I plaster that smile on my face that fooled a lot of people, but it never fooled her. And she would really dig deep to get me to draw out the best version of myself and didn't accept me minimizing myself. So find those people, and the minute you find people that prefer you at your worst than when you're coming out into your best, drop them, because they are crabs in the barrel and they don't care for you. And that takes a lot of discernment. So if you're not a person of prayer, figuring out how to connect to that intuition. But for me, it's been prayer and asking God to take people out of my life because I don't have the strength to do it. And whew, that is a dangerous prayer.
Sure. Yeah,
people have dropped like flies after it. But if you truly want that elimination of people that are chaff and not wheat, you gotta be intentional with your relationships. Even if you're only 15 or 16, it starts now, because some of the decisions that I made that could have ruined my life were 16, 17-year-old Ogechi. And to think that I was even considering doing those things is wild. And so a lot of people are like, oh, this happens when you're older. No, that discipline and that mindset of discernment starts however young you can start, because people, especially nowadays with social media, are ruthless, and that starts at a really young age. So knowing who is truly your friend or who prefers the chameleon version of you is a really important skill. So learn it and practice it and pray about it, because it's a skill that can save your life.
I love everything you said, and it's beautiful. So what I want to know and we want to know is, if somebody wants to contact Ogechi, to build with her, collaborate, give us all your information, Ogechi. What you got going on?
You can follow me on Instagram at GetchMeIfYouCan. That's
I like that. I like that.
GECH me if you can. And my website is getchmeifyoucan.com. It's not as updated as it, but it will be after this weekend. And you can email me at ogechi@catchmeifyoucan.com if you're interested in me as a speaker or even a personal trainer. I do virtual training.
Yes. As Nori says in the Drink Champs podcast, he always gives flowers to people while they're still alive, and I want to give you your flowers.
Thank you.
I want to give you daisies, your dandelions, because I look at you and I'm just so proud of you, of the human you've become.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful.
Thank you.
All right, let me stop. All right, so as we always do in the Know That Show podcast, we end with a quote, and I was really thinking about this one, and I'm going to share with you my favorite quote, which comes to us from Saint Dr. Martin Luther King, and it reads as such. Well, I don't need to read it. I got it in my head. Faith is taking the first step without seeing the whole staircase. Peace, family.
Feeling boom. Got that light so dim in the room. Got the other light, cause I turn it doom. Then my man Mel on the beat. Keep on the beat to the back, unique. She wanna be on me like a freak. I was like, damn it, her last week. Met me at the job, but she wanna twinkle, 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 don't stop. I was like, man, don't.